think there's something that could be learned based on how people respond during connect time. Like, as soon as connect time starts, I normally pop up and can't wait to see how many people I can meet. And then there's other people who just kind of fade into their seat. Please don't come over and talk to me. Please don't come over and talk to me. All right, this morning, we didn't have testimonies, and so I'm going to start with my own little testimony. So Kit and I have, we've been a part of River City Church for a long time, and over the period of years, we've been a part of different groups. I feel like we've had a million different names for the groups, whatever they may be: city groups, community groups, table groups. Remember we had quads and triples and all these different groups that we've had over the years. But we always had a close knit group of friends that we had done life together, literally for decades. And, so that was kind of our go-to group. We really never gave ourselves into these other groups. And, but you get older, and some of you are probably starting to experience this, right? You get older, and the people that you've done life with, man, they get busy, right? They start having kids, or their kids get older, they start doing different things. You just don't have the time like you used to. You don't invest the time with each other like you used to. Marriage, relationships become hard. Things go crazy, man. I don't understand it. But something feels like in maybe the mid 40s, it just seems like things go nuts. And anyway, these relationships, they don't continue on the same way. And so that was kind of Kit and I. And so you go through COVID, which was, traumatic for all of us in terms of our relationships. But coming out of COVID, I was approached, or Kit and I were approached by one of the city groups, and they said, hey, we've got some openings. Would you guys want to do it? And I am very extroverted, and after coming out of COVID, I would say yes to anything that involved people. Kit would say no to anything that involved people, but don't worry, she said yes, and so we joined this group. And they were people that I've known for a while. They're here, so I'm not gonna say anything bad about them. Mostly in this section over here, a little over here. But people that I had known, I've seen them at church and had relationship with, but hadn't not that kind of vulnerable relationships where you're going deep. Anyways, so they invite us to be a part of this group. We decide that we're going to do it. And I was skeptical going into it that this was going to be this dream of community that I had, because I felt like I had it and it just didn't last. And so I had this dream of community that really, in order to have community, in order to have people that you can be vulnerable with, people that really know you, people that understand kind of how you're wired, and man, this is where you go a little crazy. Remember that, you got to remember this. In order to have that, I had a dream in my mind that it would require a long history of doing life together, right? That in my mind. So I'm skeptical going into it. Is this really going, is it really going to make a difference? And that's not really why I was doing it. It's not like I was doing it because I needed this. I didn't need that. I'm good. How you doing, Tom? I'm doing good, right? I didn't need that. I didn't feel like I need. What did I need? I just wanted to be around people, man. It's coming out of COVID. I want to do it. So I find out really quickly that this group specifically was very intentional about pursuing relationships on mission. This group had been around for a while and have developed some really good things that they were doing that made it very intentional. In other words, we arranged our lives around the group, right? We respected the time that we were gonna be together. We respected it. We made allowances for it. It was very intentional, and it was on mission. We weren't just getting together to hang out. We were getting together because we want to become like Jesus. How can we best use this time that we're together to be like Jesus? And it was so much so. They were so intentional, so on mission, that Lawton Graves, who is an attorney, wrote a covenant. Got just a little snippet of the there you go. This is the city group covenant, which is hysterical. I would love to read it, but I do not have enough time. But I mean, we laugh. But what this expresses is, man, we want to be intentional. We want to commit to something, right? And so if you read through this, it's that you're going to make the group a priority, that you're going to be there, that you're going to listen to people, that you're going to be authentic. You're not going to hide things, right? You're going to be vulnerable. You're going to be transparent. You are going to help others become like Jesus, and you're going to allow them to help you become like Jesus, right? In the most legalese way possible, which is so funny. Okay, so we joined the group. Fast forward. I said a year, but I think it was more like 6 months. I don't know. I think I was in the group for maybe 6 months, and then just things in my life go nuts. My stepfather has a stroke and has this long battle in the hospital for about a month before he finally passes. And then come to find out that my mom needs help, and so she moves in with us, and we're trying to figure out what life looks like moving forward. And I had no idea when I joined the group that was going to happen. I had no idea the need that I was going to have, right? But there I was in this group that was intentional, purposeful, in the way that we were meeting together, making small deposits over literally just like 6 months. I don't know, less than a year for sure. I'm horrible with dates. Small deposits of saying no to other things to be there, forcing ourselves to be vulnerable, forcing ourselves to share what's going on in our lives and to respect other people as they're sharing what's going on in their lives. And I was thinking about this quote of you don't dig a well when you're thirsty. You don't dig a well when you're thirsty. You dig the well so that when you're thirsty, you have it. And that quote kept coming up as I was just thinking about that time, is because at the time I wouldn't have said I needed to dig a well. And a lot of times what happens is when you need the well, man, if you haven't already dug it, it's too late. What does this have to do with anything? We're talking about patterns. We're talking about this idea of patterns in our life. And I believe that the pattern of Jesus and the pattern of the New Testament and the early church is one of intentionally pursuing authentic relationships on mission. Every day, we're making decisions about who we're becoming. Every day we're making those decisions. We're following those patterns. Paul, at one point, when he wrote to the church in Rome, this is the way he said it. Romans 12, verse 2, he says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." We're being formed. We're being formed one way or the other. Every day we're being more formed. The question is, are we being conformed to the pattern of the world, or are we being transformed by the renewing of our mind? We're either passively becoming something or we're actively becoming something. Passively, just whatever happens, that's who we're becoming. Or is it proactive and I'm actively becoming who deep down I want to be? Then we have this verse, if you can put it up, the Romans 12:2. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. His good, pleasing, and perfect will. If we can allow ourselves to be transformed, then we can experience this good, pleasing, and perfect will. Life, the way that life was designed to be lived. Life that is truly life. Jesus says that I've come that you may have life. Peter, one of Jesus' closest friends, calls him the author of life. There it is. There's a lot of followers of Jesus, and then there are disciples of Jesus, right? A follower is someone who follows them, but it's not necessarily disciplining themselves, being discipled, right? Those words are connected. Disciplines are followers that seriously intend to become like Jesus. Disciples are followers that seriously intend to become like Jesus. They discipline themselves. They force themselves to do what doesn't necessarily come naturally. They force themselves to do what maybe they don't want to do because of who they want to be, right? Disciples recognize that we don't drift naturally in good directions. We discipline ourselves. We prioritize ourselves. We systematically and progressively rearrange our lives. If we want to be a disciple, if you want something, if you actually want to become like Jesus, then you will do something to make yourself more like Jesus, right? Plenty of followers are like, yeah, that Jesus, man, good stuff. Love what he says. Let's go to lunch. The disciple says, what can I do to become like him? What patterns do I need to renew my mind so that I can be transformed to be more like him? Whether you're a follower of Jesus this morning, a disciple of Jesus this morning, or you don't believe anything, you know that this is true. This is true in the natural. We're either disciplining ourselves to become who we want to be, or we're just going along with whatever. If Jared were here, I would make a joke about him training for a marathon, okay? He's not. I'm gonna share a different illustration. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and it was a conference for entrepreneurs that are using the same kind of technology that we use in my company. And I was at this dinner with them, and I was struck by how many of them don't have a business yet. They're at a conference to talk about how to grow your business and how to do this and how to do that, but they don't have a business yet. And I asked them, I was like, well, when are you gonna start? Oh, I'm just waiting. Waiting for what? Like, they're just drifting. I'm like, have you taken time off work to go and develop your plan? No, I make good money. I don't want to give that up. Oh, okay. This is true in the natural. That if there's something that we want to become, then we have to make decisions to become who we want to become. Every day we're being formed. Every day we're being formed. Are we systematically and progressively rearranging our lives to become what we want to become? Being formed in the way that we want to be formed? Where are you this morning when you think about that? Do you think that you're being conformed or transformed? Do you think you're more passively being developed, or do you think you are more actively being transformed? And what do you want? Remember when Jesus says that at one point? He's like, what do you want? What do you want this morning? The pattern of Jesus in the New Testament is one of intentionally pursuing authentic relationships on mission. Why? Because that's what we want. That's so funny. If you ask anybody about what they think about community, they have a picture of what community is. They have a picture of exactly what they want. What are you doing to pursue that? How are you how are you using that pattern? That's a little hiccup. How are you using that pattern to affect the way that you're behaving? How are you prioritizing your life in such a way to make that a reality? Jesus modeled this. Jesus modeled authentic relationships on mission. I think about this verse. So Matthew, one of Jesus' 12, writes this in his account in verse 26, verses 36 through 38. He says, then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. So this is the night before the crucifixion. This is the night before, it gets bad for Jesus. And he knows what's coming. Nobody else really understands what he's going to go through. They don't understand the payment that will be made on the cross to make a way where there was no way. They don't know the great toll. I don't believe that we know the toll that was paid by Jesus, but he knew. And so he's becoming overwhelmed as he's thinking about this, and he takes his disciples. These are the 12. These are the people they've left their jobs, right? They're following him. They're making sacrifices to be with him, and he takes them, and they go to a place called Gethsemane, and he says to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. And then from the 12, he takes Peter and the two sons of Zebedee. These are a fun name for James and John, sons of thunder. He takes the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Jesus had his ministry to the world, right? Jesus had his ministry to the world. He had his ministry to his followers. He had hundreds of people that would come out, whenever he spoke, that would come to hear his words. And then he had his disciples. And then from his disciples, he had his three that he brings forward. This is unsettling to think about. God the Son telling his three closest disciples, his closest friends, he says, man, I am overwhelmed with sorrow. Be with me. Watch with me. I need you. Ooh. Jesus being authentic and vulnerable, going progressively deeper with people, right? From the world, from the disciples, from the 12 to the 3, going progressively deeper. Jesus needed his friends. I'm not sure if that's heretical, right? It maybe needs a strong word. It seems like he really, really wanted them to be there. Jesus, God the Son, who we knew ate and drank and was a man just like any other man, it seems like he needed that relationship. He needed to be authentic and vulnerable with someone. Who are you vulnerable with this morning? Who would you share that with if you were overwhelmed to the point of death? Who are you vulnerable with? Who are you sharing your struggles with? The pattern of Jesus is one of being authentic, intentional, pursuing relationships on mission. And did you know Jesus prayed for us that we would have that? Jesus prayed for us. In John, he writes it like this. John records this prayer that Jesus has, where he says, my prayer, God the Son praying to God the Father. Figure that out. God the Son praying to God the Father. My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message. That's us. That all of them may be one. That all of them may be as one. That they would be unified. That they would have this common unity. That all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one, as we are one. I and them and you and me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Complete unity. then the world will know. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. How significant is it that this is the prayer of Jesus? How significant is it that God the Son prays to God the Father? The Trinity, right? That there is God the Son, God the Father, God the Holy Spirit, this crazy thing that's hard for us to wrap our brains around. And yet, what is it but a community? We are meant for community because God is community. We're made in his image, and just as he's three persons in a community, it's fundamental to the core of who we are, that we are meant for community. And in this prayer, it seems like Jesus is saying, to the degree that we love one another, the world will know. How's the world gonna know about the work of Jesus? How is the world gonna know about what God has accomplished through God the Son? Through the way that we are unified with one another, for the way that we love one another, because people will look at them and they'll say, look at those crazy Christians, man, they love each other. And they did. They made fun of the Christians. These Christians, they will accept anybody into their group. That's the kind of thing they would say. When people would get discarded in the first century, but when people would get discarded, you know what the Christians would do? They would go and they would bring them in and they'd say, come, I've got a place for you. I've got a place that you fit in. And the world said, that's crazy. And you know what happened? The church exploded and it spread because of this prayer. Why? Why all this talk about unity? It seems like Jesus is praying like this thing over and over again about unity, I and me, the way that we're one, they're one, all this unity. It's for the sake of a mission so that the world may know about the love of God expressed in the person of Jesus. He prays for our mission to let the world know. What happens? Well, the early church starts. Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2, starting in verse 42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. So this is the church. Jesus goes through the process. He goes through the crucifixion, and then his followers stay, guess what? In Jerusalem, in the very place where he was crucified. Something miraculous happens. I would say miraculous. Something happens that emboldens his followers to stay in the very place where he was crucified, and the church begins and it's exploding. Right? As Christians, we believe it was the resurrection. Why were they emboldened? Why was there this supernatural growth in the very place where he was crucified? Because they saw the risen Jesus. And they were like, oh my gosh, it's all true. Everything that he said was true. How do I know? Because the dude was dead and he came back. I saw him die and then he came back, and I saw him eat fish with my friends. I'm gonna believe him. I'm not leaving Jerusalem. I'm gonna go tell the world. And so the church is born. And this is the picture that we see. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings and to the fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. They devoted themselves. They devoted. That means that they continued steadfastly. I'm like, come on, there's gotta be a better word. They continued steadfastly. That's the best I can get. They said no to things. They devoted themselves. They said no to things that might be a distraction. No, I am devoted to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to breaking bread and to prayer. No, I will say no to things. They didn't conform to the pattern of the world. They said, no, I am devoted to this. They disciplined themselves. They forced themselves to do something that might not be natural. They committed themselves. They signed ridiculous contracts. Okay, no, they didn't sign ridiculous. But they devoted themselves. They gave of themselves in a way that can be very different than church today. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. And everyone was filled with awe with the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together, and they had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. They devoted themselves, and as a result, man, people were coming into the kingdom. People were coming in and experiencing exactly what they were experiencing. They were learning from the apostles. The apostles are just the disciples that are now on mission, and they're gonna spread the word. And so they're coming in and they're experiencing it. But think about this. The mission of God is accomplished not through individuals, but through community. Through community, just like Jesus prayed, right? It wasn't, they came because of Peter. They came because there was a community of people that were willing to devote themselves to something. I want to go find out what that is. The world is beginning to know about the love of God, and it explodes from there. This pattern of Jesus and the New Testament of intentionally pursuing authentic relationships on mission. Don't we all want that? Don't we all want that? I mean, if we're honest, we want that. But then we've got our list of reasons of why, but it's hard. Why is it hard? Because people are crazy. Okay, not me. On the scale, I'm normal. Everybody else, all of you people, you're crazy. And you make it really hard. Giving up on church because it's full of broken people. Giving up on, imagine, how do I say this? Okay, let's say you go to a gym and everybody in the gym is fit, man, and they are toned and they're wearing their little skin tight things and whatever. And you go there and you got just that little bit of flab that's just hanging out, right? Are you gonna go to that gym? I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't go to the gym. I don't need to. But if I were to go to a gym and they all looked all trim and awesome, would I feel like I could go there? Or would I feel like I'm in the wrong gym? I gotta be honest with you, I wanna go to a gym where I look good. Look at these guys. I'm way better. But for some reason, when we talk about church, we're like, I don't want to go to that church. Man, those people are screwed up. Yeah, so are you, dude. Maybe they're more screwed up than you. That'll make you look good. You might be the preacher. That should be our response. But instead, for some reason, we love to get offended. We love to just use it as an excuse to not be vulnerable, to just not have to devote ourselves, to not have to discipline ourselves, to not have to force ourselves to do something that's not natural. Look, we've all been hurt, and we have all hurt. But church is a place where we should be able to hurt out loud, right? And that's messy. Oh, it's messy. If you go to a church that demonstrates this kind of authentic pursuit of Jesus that we're talking about, it's messy. I hear people a lot and they'll say things like, I've been wounded by the church. No, man, you haven't been wounded by the church. You've been wounded by people. You've been wounded by people. And the church is made up of broken people. It's gonna happen. The question is, how are you gonna respond to that? You know what Paul says? He's like, man, bear with one another. He would write these letters to the churches and he would be like, bear with one another. Why would he say bear with one another? Because man, people are crazy. It's gonna be so hard. You know what? It's not hard to bear with one another when they're great. He wouldn't say that. He'd be like, enjoy it, brothers, it's awesome. But instead he says, bear with one another, forgive one another, devote yourselves to one another. Why? Because they're just as jacked up as you. Christian community, this idea of pursuing it. We all believe that we're broken and the only thing that makes us whole is what Jesus has accomplished for us. That's what unifies us. That's the common unity that we all have. We should be the most diverse group, right? We should be all kinds of political persuasions. We should be all kinds of rich people, poor people, right? Different races. We should all be together because what unifies us is Jesus. That's the community that we have. And what happens when the world sees that? Think about this neighborhood that we're going to move into one day. I can't wait. Because I hope that neighborhood sees the people going to the church and they're like, oh my gosh, they got all types that go to that church. I want to be a part of that. That's Jesus' prayer for us. But it's so hard. And the pattern of this world is to shun people, to eliminate people that make us uncomfortable, right? To eliminate people that are different than us. There's people that you're nervous that one friend group will find out that you're friends with this other person, right? Was it Seinfeld? It's like worlds colliding. You don't want those worlds to collide, man, because if they find out that I'm friends with this person, oh boy. The world wants us to shun people. The world wants us to turn. That's the pattern of this world. But what if they see us getting along? What if they see us unified in Jesus? Henry Nouwen, who started a Christian community, he said this, he said, community is the place where the person you least want to live always lives. That is so true. Community is the place where the person you least want to live always lives. So it's hard because people are broken. It's hard because we have a dream of a perfect community. I told you. The reason that I was skeptical about a city group, the reason I probably wouldn't have pursued a city group at all is because I had a dream of a perfect one. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, is a German dude, really smart. He said this, he says, the person who loves, that was for Jared, because Jared pronounced it differently. The person who, I just totally took all the power out of this quote. The person who loves their dream of community will destroy community. The person who loves their dream of community, oh man, it's a beautiful city on a hill, this dream that I have for community, right? It's just filled with perfect people who love me, and they think like me, and they do the things that I like to do. We have this perfect dream. The person who loves their dream of community will destroy community. But the person who loves those around them will create community. Some of us, we have that dream. We have a dream of community, and it's an idealized version. And it rarely does that idealized version require forgiveness, devotion, sacrifice, discipline. Man, I would love to be a part of it. It was only perfect. If it just ticked all the boxes. I once had a person come up to me at River City years ago, and after a sermon, and they asked me why I used the New International Version for all of my scripture references. And I was like, weird, okay. I said, well, it's the easiest one to read, like when you're reading, quickly on a Sunday. But when you study the word, you don't just study one translation. Oh man, well, we really like the church. We really like the people. We really connected with it. My kids had a good time in there, but we can't be a part of a church that doesn't teach from the authorized version, from the King James. Dude, your idealized version of community, it's not gonna happen. right? We all have boxes to tick rather than committing ourselves and saying, what does it look like to have a common unity around the mission of Jesus? It's hard when we have this perfect image that it has to be. It's hard because we don't want to commit. We like to date churches, right? We like to date. We float from one to another, consuming what we like, disregarding the things that we don't like, right? Do kids say friends with benefits anymore? I don't know if they say that. So you might say it's not even dating, it's friends with benefits. You're just taking selfishly from the relationship. You're not giving of yourself. Okay, that was wrong. Okay. If you were offended by that, get over it. It's community. Discipline yourself. Bear with me. Forgive me. Oh, now I'm totally off. Okay. All right, here we go. When you're dating a person, you don't really know that person because you're not going to give yourself to that person until you are under a commitment where I can be vulnerable with you and I know that you're not going to leave me. So if you were just dating churches, you're not going to experience it. In the context of a commitment, there's always, if there is no commitment, then you're always holding something back. And then I think we all went through this COVID pattern where you could get out of anything, right? I'm not talking at the beginning of COVID, like when everybody was shut down, right? But you know what I'm talking about when we started to come out of COVID and it was like, hey man, do you want to come to my kid's piano recital? And you're like, I've got a little thing in the back of my throat and could be COVID, so I better not come, right? Or you know what? I know somebody who's tested positive. I better not come. Like for your safety, because I love you, I don't want anybody to get sick, so I would love to go to your kid's recital, but I'm not, right? Like so we've all come through this thing where you could get out of anything, and it like fed this already commitment phobia that we had, where it was so easy to get out of anything that required us to wear pants, right? Like, gosh, I would love to do that, but I'd have to put pants on. But that's true, right? We're coming out of this time. Many of us have automated our lives, right? How many of you signed up for like Walmart Plus? You finally went for that Amazon Prime. You signed up for Shipped, whatever, so that you could interact with the least people possible, right? And it made sense. You didn't want to get COVID, but now you kind of like it. Think about that. There is an epidemic of loneliness. There is an epidemic of loneliness in this country. Like it's not up for debate. This isn't like Christianese, okay? This is real. That people feel more lonely today than they did a couple years ago, 5 years ago. Every year they get progressively more lonely. I read a paper by a health insurance company who referred to it as a moral matter. What does that mean when a health insurance company makes a moral decision, right? I can't get them to pay for a colonoscopy, but all of a sudden they're making moral decisions about my life. I saw red for a second there. But my point is that the world sees it as a moral issue. They're beginning to see it as like, guys, there's something going on. People are feeling more lonely than ever. People are feeling more disconnected than ever. There is a shortage of friendships. It's another thing. As years have gone by, that there are fewer relationships that we engage in. Men disproportionately, but women as well. Like we engage in less friendships. As time goes on, it gets worse. This is the pattern of the world. Will we be conformed to that pattern, or will we be transformed and pursue intentional, authentic relationships that are on mission? This morning, let's pray. Let's pray for that. Let's stand. If you're lonely this morning, if you say, man, that's me, I want that. Press into that. Join a city group. Tell somebody, I need to be a part of something. And then arrange your life around it. Don't just think that it's gonna happen naturally. And for those of you this morning who say, man, I'm good, I got it. I've got it. Well, great for you. What about everybody else? You know, our group, we committed as part of our covenant, we're gonna be together for a period of time, but then we're gonna break up. Why? Well, because we wanna make sure that other people get to experience community. We're on mission to become more like Jesus. And that means that we're gonna give ourselves to a whole nother group of people so that they can also experience it. This morning, that's my prayer. Holy Spirit, come and move. Show us the picture of who we ultimately wanna be and empower us to become more like Jesus, more like you. Draw us into community. Show us those things that we've held on to that make it so difficult for us to be vulnerable and to be dependent, to be authentic. Meet us this morning.